So much more coming up from Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, joins us always on a Thursday, and it's always good to have you in the studio, Philip. Anyway, but particularly when we've got such a big issue like, should the UK join the US if they go ahead with airstrikes on Iran in that war? This is your area of expertise. I asked you earlier, do you think we will? Do you think we should?
I think we should, and I think we will. We're already involved. We're providing the United States support because of the bases that they're launching a lot of the attacks, or could launch a lot of the attacks from. We're providing wider.
And we have to give permission for the US to launch those.
Yes, when they're using RAF bases in the UK, they're using RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. We're providing other support that I probably can't talk about on air, the Americans can't do that. We have provided the Americans tanker support beforehand whenever they've carried out air attacks.
Yeah. But there's an issue over Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands. Okay, amazing how much the Chagos Islands come up. Totally irrelevant, handing them to Mauritius. We just happen to have a massive base there, so does the US. But we, according to Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, who is the worst person in the world, and wrong about everything, we understand, sources has given advice to the Prime Minister saying that it would be, if the Israeli war on strikes on Iran are deemed to be illegal under international law, we would not be allowed to give permission for a US craft to take off from Diego Garcia. This is insane.
Well, thank goodness the Attorney General can only give advice, because international law is not black and white, and therefore his advice can be ignored. How
is it illegal for Israel to have a preemptive defensive strike on a country that has said, we know they're developing nuclear weapons, even the IEA, the Atomic Agency, knows they are. You could developing uranium and enriching it to the point where it's beyond nuclear power station capability and its military capability, and you've stated repeatedly, we want to annihilate Israel. And they have used their proxies and have previously bombed Israel. I'm not quite sure how people don't think it's a defensive act.
But this is the same Attorney General who won't refer individuals back to the courts again to get their sentences taken to a proper level for raping children, who represented Gerry Adams, who's represented terrorists and horrible regimes around the world against the British state. Why is in this position? I do not know. So his advice isn't worth the paper it's written on. If
he's just an old human rights lawyer chum of the Prime Minister.
Well, exactly. And
we're going to be hearing a lot more about Lord Hermer.
And is dangerous, is very dangerous. We're providing a lot of support for the Americans. We will not be providing aircraft going in and dropping bombs in Iran. We don't have the same capability. Diego Garcia is where the American B-2 bombers, their stealth bombers, are based. Those are the ones that carry these massive ordnance penetrators, or GBU-57 bombs, the ones that are 30,000 pounds or 13.6 tons.
And then the key thing about this is only America has these weapons that are capable of basically penetrating rock underneath a mountain. We believe this particular, the Fordow, is it Fordow nuclear site?
Fordow nuclear site. The bombs
buried beneath a mountain in the rock.
The bombs can, in best conditions, penetrate a couple of hundred feet before they then explode. And 13.6 tons of explosives going off will register on the Richter scale as an earthquake, and lots of those going in would do a lot. However, the Fordow nuclear site is anticipated it's another 100+ feet deeper than that, and it's whether those shock waves would cause enough damage in them to cause the tunnels.
But worth a try.
Definitely worth a try.
What about the idea that, look, if we got involved, we become more of a target?
We're already a target. Iran hates us probably more than it hates the United States. It blames the UK for many of its ills, and part of that goes right back...
Our past in the Middle East, or...?
Yeah, part of that's under our past in the Middle East, because Iran was never a homogenous country until officials in Whitehall in London took a map and drew a straight line with a ruler and went, we've taken Persia, we've split it up into this, and you've got that. We'll call that bit Iran.
They hate us. We're the little Satan. They hate us already. So
we've also. I mean, a big little
our
Satan.
security services foiled an Iranian plot on British territory only recently. It hasn't even gone to court yet. I mean, we know what they're doing. They've been funding virtually every terror plot going. Yeah. And we are already being damaged by Iran.
They have caused the casualties of most British troops deployed in operations in Iraq and Afghanistan in recent years, because Iranian-sponsored Hezbollah have provided the training and improvised explosive devices for all of the different groups that operated throughout Iraq. And I remember them training the Taliban in Afghanistan and crossing the border and in there. Nobody thought that Iran would get involved in that, and we had very, very clear intelligence.
And they've been supplying some weaponry to Russia as well.
Yes.
I mean, they need to be gone.
They do need to be
End
gone.
of. Okay.
Definitely.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. It's the latest coming out of Iran. The Iranian foreign minister has confirmed that he is due to meet with his British and European counterparts tomorrow. Bear in mind, of course, the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is today in America meeting with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. That was a last-minute trip. Also from Israel, the Israeli defense minister says Iran's supreme leader, quote, cannot continue to exist. This is after the latest Iranian missile attack. Of course, we saw an attack on a hospital in Israel. It is quite extraordinary. The Iron Dome, the protection for Israel is extraordinary. If they did not have this protection, we would be seeing mass casualties in Israel. One of the things I want to put to you, and I put this to the Israeli ambassador, Zibi Hotfeli, who's in the studio yesterday. Some people are saying, look at these precision attacks that Israel is carrying out. Iran is blatantly, openly attacking civilians, no question at all. They're not attacking any military sites. Israel is quite clearly the precision bombing of these targeting of not just military sites, nuclear sites, but the scientists, the military leaders. Donald Trump saying that we know where the Ayatollah is and we can take Khomeini out as and when we choose, but not yet, but apparently he told the Israelis not to do it when they'd wanted to do it. I think, again, be totally justified thing to do. The niceties of international law notwithstanding, I just don't care. This is about national survival. But I put to the ambassador from Israel, why is it we've seen so many civilian casualties in Gaza from Israeli bombing compared with Iran, where we have not seen, despite a whole week of massive bombardment, we have not seen mass civilian casualties? Can you explain?
Yeah, it's a very good question, very pertinent question, and it's really quite simple. Iran does not tend to put its military infrastructure in the middle of built-up civilian areas. And where Israel has had to target those built-up civilian areas to get individual military leaders in their apartments, they have had very, very accurate intelligence that they are in those apartments. And those military leaders don't surround themselves with lots of other civilians to keep them safe in it. Whereas in Gaza, Hamas deliberately put their military infrastructure under civilian infrastructure. Yeah. They deliberately brought lots of civilians in and around where they would put their military placements. And even if you drop the most accurate of weapons, and Israel only has a few of them, even if you drop the most accurate weapons, the collateral damage that comes from whenever something goes bang is going to kill civilians that are in the area if they're there.
So two just very, very different policies. This is down, again, something we've been making a point for a long time. This is Hamas policy.
It's Hamas policy. Hamas
want as many
civilian casualties as possible. They want as many pictures of children on our televisions that are suffering as possible because they know that's...
It is incredible to me, though, reports after reports about all these attacks by Israeli forces on civilians who are queuing up to get humanitarian aid. And it's amazing, given that everyone apparently in Gaza has a mobile phone, how little footage there ever is of these actual Israeli soldiers firing on these people. And I still can't work out, why would the Israelis provide a load of aid and then after these awful reports about Israeli attacks on civilians, mostly, I don't know for sure, most likely false because they're coming out of Hamas-led media and foreign and health ministry, and aid workers who just frankly couldn't possibly know what had actually happened to those people who are coming in. That all these people apparently never had mobile phones on when the IDF are actually firing. But what on earth would be the motivation for the IDF to do that?
Well, the only motivation would be if they thought that their positions were going to be stormed and overrun, especially if people had weapons and therefore were Hamas. And Hamas are caught because they are not controlling the food supply into the people.
Which is how they make money.
Well, it's not only how they make money. I've seen videos of them dealing with people who haven't followed the Hamas route, and what they do is they beat them with sticks, then shoot them with semi-automatic weapons in the legs before they then shoot them in the head. and they do that publicly in front of everyone with women and children surrounded them, and nobody's doing that. And we never see pictures of Hamas fighters being taken into the hospitals to be treated.
Funny that.
They're never there.
No, even though they make up roughly half of those who've been killed.
Exactly.
Even under Hamas's own figures.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's utterly bizarre. It's almost like what we're being told about what's happening isn't entirely true.
Oh,
I know.
Ever.
Who's going to tell the BBC that, though?
No,
let's look. We talked about these benefits bill rising, and I will come back to that. And we talked about migrants, and we're going to be coming on to that with Stephen Wolfe in a few moments. Let's get to some other topics, because 2 drugs to treat Alzheimer's have been rejected for use by the NHS because their benefits are too small to justify their high cost. This is a decision by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. They are basically standing by their earlier decision. It was reviewed to turn down, I don't know who makes up the names of these drugs. I'm going to get it wrong, but I'll try anyway. Donanemab, or I don't know, and lecanemab. Probably completely different pronunciations, but they considered new information submitted by the manufacturers. The various Alzheimer's charities said the decision was disappointing and a painful setback. But these 2 drugs are made by 2 different companies. They say they're going to appeal. But they work in a similar way. They slow down the early stages of Alzheimer's. It's a huge step forward. But they cost a lot of money. You need to have brain scans regularly. They need to be administered regularly. It's not just give someone a pill and it's all over and done with. There is a huge cost to the NHS. Do you think it was a right decision?
Well, you have to let NICE do it, but the cynic in me turns around and says, who's going to benefit out of that apart from the patient? It would be the local authorities, which is because it would reduce the need for social care. Is the NHS going to benefit out of it? No, it's a massive cost to the NHS, and therefore if you compare it to the fat jabs, actually who benefits from the fat jabs? It's the NHS, because what they're doing is...
No, it doesn't. There's no evidence that it will. No, this is the thing. I don't understand why we're not giving a drug to people who are suffering from early stages dementia and Alzheimer's, but we're going to give, which so far untreatable, but we are going to give people free fat jabs on the NHS. Given that you lower your appetite anyway on these drugs, you will be spending less money on food, certainly on the takeaway. You're only getting these on the NHS if you're massively overweight. You're not massively overweight because you're eating too much broccoli. You're massively overweight because you're living on takeaways. Sorry, end of. And you're buying a lot of unhealthy food. So the money you're saving on that alone, you could afford. Same reason I don't think we should give nicotine patches out on NHS. If you can afford to buy cigarettes, you can afford your nicotine patches. I think it's just obscene. I don't know whether these, I'm not a medic, I don't know whether these drugs are any good, but I don't understand some of the things that we are willing to spend money on, which can easily be solved by people doing things themselves.
This is, yes, I agree, individuals should pay towards their jobs and all the rest of it if it's a lifestyle issue, in the same way with nicotine patches. But it's the NHS that's going to win out over a longer term, because it'll stop people getting diabetes as early. That's a big cost to the NHS.
The actuarial firms, the pension firms, they have not changed how they're going to be making payouts based on whether or not people are on these jabs. If these jabs were having the massive impact they were going to have, and people were going to lose all this weight, they weren't going to get so much cancers, diabetes, heart attacks, have amputations, all of that stuff. If that were the case, and these people were going to keep the weight off, if that's the only basis on which these you would have that benefit for individuals and the NHS, if that were the case, people would be living longer, and then they would have to, the pension companies would have to pay out lower annual dividends. They're not doing that, and they're not doing it because they've looked into the studies and they know that these jabs won't work long term. And
that's because the studies are too short term at the moment for them to make those levels of financial decisions.
No, you come off the drugs, you put the weight back on. And a huge number of people don't lose a significant amount of weight.
But these drugs have only been around for a couple of years, and that doesn't give them enough.
We also don't know the safety data.
Correct.
I swear to you, in 5 years' time, there is going to be a massive scandal about VR. There are no drugs without massive side effects.
Exactly.
There have been some reports about an awful lot of deaths related to people taking these jabs.
No, every drug's got side effects. You take antidepressants, and you and I had to take antidepressants, and you open the indicators and warnings thing and read it, and the top thing says this drug could make you depressed. It could make you suicidal.
I'm not sure this is a good drug.
Why am I on this?
I know, exactly. Well, we should talk about one final word, quick on this one. Notting Hill Carnival, if they don't get any more cash to deal with basically policing and public safety. We're talking about, was it 1 million, 2 million people sometimes at this carnival in Nottingham? I used to live just round there. Most people who live there just frankly board up their homes and get the hell out for that long weekend. But do you think that they should be either moved? Do you think they should be getting more public cash?
No, they need to make the cash themselves. The policing bill in 2023 alone was £11.7 million. Yeah. Last year there was 8 people stabbed at it.
2 to death.
Anything where it's normal for people. Hey, no, a few people got stabbed. Hey, people are on drugs. A few people have been sexually assaulted. No, that's wrong. It's like football hooligans, football matches. I'd ban all football because of the hooliganism that goes on.
I think we've strayed into different territory now, but there we are. I'm going to leave the totalitarian supreme leader, Philip Ingram, for a moment.